Are collectors still buying slabs? No, of course they're not, but they are. In some cases, they're not. In some cases, they are. It's a little more of a nuanced discussion. We're going to talk about it and look at some data up next on this video from Bronzeville Comics. Hello, panelologists. This is Jim from Bronzeville Comics coming to you with another video. And before we get started, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the description for links to my Instagram, whatnot, email, and eBay store. And in this video, I'm going to take a look at some case studies. We're not going to look at every book, but we're going to kind of get an idea of this idea, are slabs still selling? We know the comic market is down, so we're less interested in the value of the slab compared to where it was 2 or 3 years ago, but are they selling, right? I have boxes of slabs behind me. I have boxes of raw books too. What is the best thing to do? Do you want to get your book graded? Is anybody going to buy it? Or are you going to keep it raw? And that depends, right? So we're going to jump into discussion. I was watching a YouTube video where somebody was saying that there was a specific book, and we're going to look at that as our first case study, that they were using anecdotal evidence. Somebody said they had this book listed on eBay. Nobody touched it. They cracked it out of the slab and sold it right away. I have questions, right? So we're going to take a look at the specific issue and grade that was being discussed, and let's take a look at the data. So the book in question is X-Men number 12 from 1965, the first appearance of the Juggernaut. Okay. So if we look at, and the grade of the book was an 8.0. Okay. So if we look here at this book in an 8.0, right, obviously we can see this kind of follows the general trend, went up during the boom and has come down. But let's take a look. So in 2024, we're almost done with 2024. Essentially, this will probably wrap up the data for the year, right? There were 9 copies sold. Most of them, looks like 6 of the 9 were recently slabbed. Could have been CPRs, a couple of older ones, right? And it started off the year slower. There was a little bit of push with this book because Juggernaut did appear in the Deadpool Wolverine movie, and that maybe jumped up this $2,700 sale. But we can see in the last 2 months there have been 5 sales. So 9 sales in 2024. If we look at other historical data, 8 sales last year, so more sales than last year. 3 in 2022 during the height of the boom, or during the, I guess, the tail end of the boom. 9 in 2021, 6, 11, 7, 13, 7, 12, 11, and so on. So 9 sales is right around average for the number of sales of this book in an 8.0. And we can see it was selling for $2,000, right? If you had this listed as $2,000, that would be a fair price. You know, right now it's been bumped up a little bit to $2,100, but let's say $2,000 to $2,100 book. That's what it's selling for. Now, what's interesting is an 8.0. It's an expensive book. So obviously the clientele that you have to sell this book to is more limited, right? If you bring it to a show, a small local show, who's going to buy it? If you bring it to a flea market, if I have this in a whatnot sale, I need to find the guy that really wants this. And there are people looking for deals. So I was also interested in, where does this grade rank on the census, right? So now Go Collect doesn't include best offer accepted from eBay in their aggregation. So you have to be aware of that. I do like it because it has pictures and it also has census data, right? So let's see here, right? The fair market value, 2150, 30-day average of 2301. I'm not sure where they get that higher value from. These two, 2420, 2390. Do those jive on the 13th of December and the 28th of November? Yeah, these appear to be best offer accepted. Again, I'm not really interested in the price. It's a $2,000+ book, right? If you listed it at $2,000, it would probably sell. Now, in a day or two, maybe, right? You need to find a collector that's willing to spend $2,000. That's a paycheck for a lot of people or more. So, but I was interested in where it falls in the census. So there are a total of nearly 4,000 copies on the census in Blue Label, and 8.0 there are only 183 of those. That puts it in the top 13%, right? Top 10% is very, collector grade, investment grade. But an 8.0 is a really, high grade for a book from 1965 that's very desired. Now, the way the story continued was that he said, I was tired trying to sell it graded. I cracked it out of the slab and sold it raw in no time. Are you going to sell this book raw for $2,000? That seems unlikely. So I looked at what data we can find for raw sales, right? So back in 2020, there was a near mint book that sold for $4,500. But here, a very fine sold for $1,250, and I'm going to corroborate this sale in a moment, right? The near mints, a couple of sales, 2019, 2020, those are very unusual. But in the very fine, the 7.0 to 8.5 range raws, and again, this is just kind of ballpark, $1,250, $375, $787, $810, $667, $572. But we can find a specific sale. Now, the highest raw sale I found of this book was here. A best offer accepted of $1,250. That's about $800 less than the book. I don't know if we can get to this. There we go. Let's look at this on eBay then. Well, that's a 4.5, 325. I guess, they're looking at similar, right? That's not the book we're interested in. The VF Plus. And it sold on December 26th. So that's more recent than even the discussion talked about. We go back to look at, they're 800, a fine copy for 827. It's hard to find a I don't know if I can't find one. Let's see. X-Men 12 Juggernaut. And let's see if we can find an eBay sold listing, right? Nothing. You're not finding high grade copies of this book, right? There's one for $650. Original owner, doesn't say much about it. But if we look at it, looks to be, it's splotching. Maybe you could clean this up, do some blue light treatment, get it to like 6 or so, but I see a crease here. I don't know. It's hard to see how far it goes down. You can even see something here on the back. I'm not sure if that would press out and clean up, but I'm saying a 5, right? Maybe a 6, not an 8. And that's about the best you're going to find, right? So I don't see one selling for $2,000, right? And the book does sell for $2,000 in grade. And there are a couple of other variables here to discuss, right? And I just we went to cover price, we went to go collect. Just a couple of other things I wanted to touch on in regards to this. Comic boom was fueled by many things: boredom, the stimulus payments, and it was also fueled by what's recorded here are online sales, right? In verified online auction sites, eBay, Heritage. I think they take into account a few others, Hakes or whatever. Doesn't include Instagram live sales. It doesn't include Whatnot, and it doesn't include in person, right? And that's a big distinction. Now, one of the things is, I do think slabs are easier to sell online than in person. People are going to trust it more. At least if you go to a show and you see a copy on somebody's wall and you take it down and you have the ability to look through it and, make sure everything is intact, that you don't see any restoration. If you're a trained comic book collector, you can get an estimated grade from that, but you're still going to want to hedge your bets. Number one, you're going to have to pay for grading. The $2,000 book, you're going to be at like unlimited level, right? You might be able to get away with high value, but let's say unlimited value, it's over $1,000. So you're going to have to pay for that. Pressing and cleaning costs money. Even if you do it yourself, it's your time and you're taking a risk. There's no guarantee that CGC is going to give this an 8 and it'll retain the same value. And if we look at how this book fares in other grades, I just want to see an 8.5 is $1,000, like a 0.5 increase is $1,000 increase. We go down to a 7.5. Now you're down to $1,200. And that's where maybe that one sale made sense. Even if you think it's an 8.0, a cracked out 8.0, I'm not paying for an 8.0. Yeah, maybe CGC sees it a little differently that day. It's only a 7.5, a 7.0 for $1,450. So that did a little bit better. And then we start to drop $939, $955. And we do see price compression here, $799, $610, $508. And we did say that one book, we're talking about a 5 or 6, somewhere between $955 and $610, according to recent sales, right? Now that makes sense. What are recent sales of this book ungraded? A fine copy sold for $827 and $871 this year. A VG, like an estimated 4.0 for about $400. What is a VG going for? A 4.0 here, $500, right? That money is your mitigated risk and the cost of grading and probably cleaning and pressing as well, right? So I think, especially for high grade and high value collectibles, it makes sense. Now, this is a book that even in a 1.0, it probably makes sense to get it graded. A 0.5 sold earlier this year for $225. So this is a book that makes sense getting graded in any condition in terms of its value, right? And we can compare here how many sales we see. So if we go to lower grades, 15, 16, 12, 6.0, 15, 22, 21, 5.5, 21, 35, 19. That one's down. 21, 29, 26, now 4.5, 31, 26, 14, that's down. But a 4.0, 27, 36, 26. I think on the whole, again, I'm looking at, these are 2022, 2023, and this is the 12 months. So that's essentially 2024. Not a huge drop in the number of graded books. So I wanted to take a look at some other books, and we're going to kind of work backwards in time, right? So the next book I wanted to look at was a modern darling, Something is Killing the Children, #1. Okay. According to GP analysis, right, 9.8s are selling for about $600, $700, right? And if we look, these are the sales by year. This year, 119, and there's been a steady decrease. 397 in 2021 when it was up to $2,000. Then 211, 184, 119. Now that is related to the value and desirability of the book. If we do see, a TV show being greenlit, that will change the dynamic, right? But right now, $600 for a high grade, a 9.8. What are people paying for high grade raws, right? $400, right? Because you're mitigating. You don't know if you buy a raw, if it is a 9.8. And there is a premium you're going to pay for a 9.8, right? You're talking about, $400 range for a high grade copy, even a near mint plus, right? Maybe somebody sold one for $700. Again, there's going to be variability there, but for the most part, you're probably getting $200 more if you get it graded. Okay, that's a high grade book, and it's an in-demand book. I want to take a look at some other examples. Is that worth getting graded? In 9.8, yes, but right, and the number of copies that have been graded has decreased, right? But now we go to a 9.6. Look at this. Last 3 years, 91, 83, 31. A 9.4, 19, 12, 21. And even then, back, it wasn't being there aren't many, under 9.6, because this is such a modern book. It came out in the era where you got it graded as soon as it, or before it got to the store, right? This was graded right away. Fresh off the stands, or shops had it sent directly from the distributor to CGC. Let's go back a little bit in time. And I wanted to look at this book, NYX #3, the first appearance of X23. Laura Kinney. Let's take a look at this book in a 9.8, right? And we could see 94, that's more sales. And this did have to do with Daphne Keene's appearance in Deadpool Wolverine, slightly more than the last 2 years. But, peaked in 2017. When is that when Logan came out? And 2018, 159 sales. So it's down from there, right? That's a 9.8. A 9.8 is $1,000-ish book. A raw sales of this, somebody did pay $1,000, but for the most part, I mean, somebody paid $350, $717, $450, $800, $500, $600, $500. You're paying much less for an ungraded book. Now, what about sales other than a 9.8, right? 9.6, about the same number, and that's still a $500+ book. 9.4s, still an expensive book, $39, $35, $47, a lot more this year. 9.2s drops down, 9.0s about the same, and then very few below that, right? So this is, again, a modern enough book that it's generally going to be in high grade, especially if it's submitted. If you have one that's kind of beat up, you're probably not submitting a 7.5, right? Even though one did sell for $442. I mean, this book is kind of popular because it's not all that plentiful, right? Let's look at another book, right? This was a darling of the boom. We know there were more copies sold around the Venom 2 movie than recently. That just has to be the case. But this, I think, is also something to look at in terms of lower grades, right? So here's Amazing Spider-Man 361. These are 9.8 sales, right? It's down, right? It was around 400 copies a year from 2018 to 2022, then down to 261, 217, 200. Still selling, and it's selling a little bit more in 2020 for a higher value in 2024 than 2023. Its value's kind of evened out, as we can see. That's for 9.8. Is it, what about 9.6s? 409, 317, 234. That's down more. 9.4, 199, 133, 90, cut in half. 9.2, 98, 82, 50, almost cut in half. 9.0, 59, 51, 27. Right? 8.5 still have, and then you get below that, it's, sub $100 book. It's not worth getting graded. Okay. And we look here, these are just kind of good indicators, 300-ish in a 9.8 and about 109.2 to 9.6. What are you going to pay for a high grade raw? About $100. So you'd have to be 150, 70, 60, 80, 80, 80, 70, 60, 60. So let's say if you had a high grade raw direct, $75, right? If you have the eye, if you get it graded and comes back 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, a little increase in value. But if you get it graded and it comes back a 9.8, that $75 that we spend on a high grade copy, all of a sudden now, you put, let's say, $25 into it. You have $100 into the book, give or take, maybe a little bit more with shipping, etc. It's a $300 book. You've made $150, $200 profit, but that's only with a 9.8. You're rolling the dice there, right? But people are still buying those 9.8s. What do I want to go to next? Let's go to a lesser key. This is still a Carnage key. It's the first appearance of Cletus Cassidy. Okay, 344. Now, currently, a 9.8 is cheap. Wasn't always that way. Let's take a look at the historical 9.8s. 66 is the last sale, right? And we can see this one has dropped off precipitously, right? Up high of 123 and 130 in 2020 and 2021, leading into the movie, 95, 54, 63, right? Now, if we look at lower grades, this is where people aren't buying slabs. Definitely. 9.6s, less than half. 9.4s, less than half. 9.2s, 27, 28, 8. 8 9.2s sold this year. 7 9.0s, right? Not a lot of 9.0s sold back in the day. 185 newsstand, just 2 8.0s, right? And we can see it's not really worth getting graded lower than that. But this is a book, it's about a $20 book, right? You can probably find a high grade copy for 20 bucks. You put another 25, 30 bucks into it, you're at 50, you're getting 66 back. It's not worth getting graded. So this is a book you would keep raw, right? Are there books worth getting graded? Now I'm going to use these examples, ASM 300, right? A very coveted book. Right, this is, oh no, I want to Spawn 1. I'm sorry. Spawn 1, which came out. I'm kind of working backwards, right? Spawn 1. What are you paying for a high grade copy? 20 bucks, 25 bucks, right? Maybe you'll get a 9.9 and it'd be worth $3,000, right? But it's kind of the chase for the 9.8 for this one, right? And we can see here, we had a bump, you know, 951, 1070, 728, 704. About the same price range, maybe a little bit more this year than last year. And actually about the same price range as 2022. We can see it bumped a little bit and then it's kind of steadied out as it's come down. Not a big drop and fall. There are plenty of these out there in 9.8s. Okay. Fair market value. Last sale was 214. That's robust. 90 day is 134. 12 month is 139. So about $130 book, right? And about 70% the number of sales this year compared to 2 years ago. 9.6, 578, 433, 315. That's down. 9.4, 269, 207, 149. That's down. 9.2, 122, 89, 66. And then, you know, about half the number of copies selling in these higher mid-grade, the cusp high grade, right? The 8.5 to 9.2. Because again, it's not worth it. You know, you're paying 50 bucks. Why don't you just pay $20, $25 for a high grade raw book if you can find it? I mean, if we wanted to, right? Let's say we want to find a Spawn 1 on eBay. And we wanted to pay between, let's say, $20 and $25. Oh, there's one on auction, a newsstand. Okay, well, $23.99 plus $4.99 shipping. Okay, a little bit more than I'd want to spend. $27 including shipping. Right? $29 including shipping. $29 including shipping. Right? If you go to a show, I would think you would be able to dig out a high grade direct copy for 20 bucks. Now that's not high grade. That is not high grade, but that's eBay, right? How about this one? This is a My Comic Shop. They do grade pretty well. They have it Fine Plus 6.5. Actually, that looks better than a Fine Plus, but whatever. You can get a high grade raw copy. There are plenty out there. What about a book that is worth more? And that's Amazing Spider-Man 300, right? 9.8. The price is dropped, right? You have to have the book priced correctly, right? But look at this. Every year since 2019, about the same number of copies of a 9.8 sell, right? A 9.6, about the same. 193, 170, 195. A 9.4, I'm just looking at direct. 191, 169, 185. The same. 9.2, 167, 157, 132. Down a little. 9.0, you're still talking $400. 126, 118, 114, 8.5, 103, 80, 194. 64, 72. 46 down in an 8.0. Same in a 7.5. Same in a 7.0. They're fewer. They're like 6.5. It's still a $250 book. Same number of copies. You know, about the same number of copies each year, irrespective of grade of this book, right? That's a highly in-demand book. That's a book that everybody wants in their collection. Sellers have no trouble selling that. Now, what about more niche books? And I'm going to go to two books, all transparency. I sold these books, right? So I had gotten a collection, and you've seen other videos. I unboxed these, you know, I had an original collection. There were actually 4 different issues of Marvel Age. I all thought were really high grade. I pressed them, cleaned them, pressed them, sent them off to CGC in a pre-screen. Okay. One of them was Marvel Age 38. This first appearance of He-Man in a Marvel comic book. A raw book, $10 to $15, right? a 9.8, and this is my sale, $125. So $15 plus 25, even if I sold for 15, that's probably the best you could do. $40. I'm into it, right? In terms of potential sale value and plus what it takes to submit it. So about $40. Sell it for 125. No brainer. No brainer. And not many copies of this sell, right? In a 9.8, 410 and 8. But you see now, we go down to lower grades, it's under $100. 29, 11, 5, 9, 4, 8, 4, 6, and then very few after that. So the 9.6 is down quite a bit. And actually, the guy that I sold it to on eBay sent me a picture of his collection of 9.8 He-Man books. He had, I think, the DC miniseries, the DC Comics Presents 47, the first Star Comics. I think all in 9.8s. So that's an example of the book's worth $10 raw at best, high grade, over 100. Same thing here. Marvel Age number 44, this anniversary cover, right? Which is kind of cool because the back has the back of his head. I mean, it's Star Brand. Nobody cares, right? Nobody cares. Maybe $10, probably $5 for this book. But, and the sales are all over the place. There aren't many of them, but there are people out there that want it. And why do they want it? That's the biggest key, right? Not every book, right? There was a whole run of Marvel Age. I pulled 4 of them, right? Because I did my research. What actually sells with some consistency? Not every month, but a few times a year in a 9.8, right? This is my sale of $130. That's, I'm selling it for $125 more than I would sell it for a raw, $120 more. Even in, the time and the CGC costs, it makes sense. There aren't that many of them, but I know that there are people who collected the Marvel 25th anniversary borders, and it does sell, right? Only 1 in 2023 and 6 this year. None in 2022. That's a little bit interesting, right? And 9.6s doesn't really sell. So it was one of those things I said, it's worth it. And I think at the price, it's a price point, right? If I had it listed for $50, I'm sure it would sell right away, right? I think I took a best offer accepted on that. So there's an example, 2 examples from the same run, and there are plenty of those in the Copper Age, of books that have not a lot of value raw, $10, maybe 20. And they're worth $100, $200 in a 9.8, right? I kind of seek those out. Now, what about this? This is a book that I actually just came across in a collection. It was not a 9.8 candidate. It's nice, but the corners are a little dull. It's New Teen Titans number 22, first appearance of Deathstroke, right? Raw, it's $100 book. I'll list this at $100. It'll probably sell, right? Add in costs, right? It would have to be, for it to be worth, it would have to be, at least an 8.5, which it probably is, to make $25, right? Even of a 9.4, which would be a little iffy, right? If I could sell it for 100, I put 25 into 125, I'm making $60. And that's a gamble. I'd probably be closer to 9.2, 9.0. All honesty. This, if I thought it was a 9.8 contender, even a strong 9.6, yeah, it makes sense. Now, does it sell, right? Or would I be sitting on a 9.8 if it was a 9.8 forever? I think my PC copy is going to be a 9.8. Well, let's take a look here. 33, 23, 42. More sold this year than the last 2 years. And this is a DC key, which makes some sense. 48, 50, 41. 9.6 about the same. 9.4s are down from 2 years ago. 9.2s are down from 2 years ago. 9.0s way down. Now you're talking about closer to $100. 8.5s about the same. 8.0s down quite a few. It's harder to sell the anything under an 8.5. Okay, I understand that, right? And we'll come back to that discussion at the end, right? It has to be worth getting graded. What can you get a 7.0 raw for? $50 maybe? I don't know. Let's look at the next book, Star Wars number 1. I did just sell one of these in an 8.0. Now, what's interesting, look at this, 9.8. Same amount as last year and more than 2 years ago. 9.6, more than 2 years ago. 9.4, more than 2 years ago. 9.2, 3 less than 2 years ago. 90, 115, 102, 114. 85, 112, 150, 119. 80, that's what I had. 89, 104, 93. About the same. I think that's my sale of 274, 75. What is this worth raw? That is not the book I want. Where is it? Star Wars 1. Right. An 80-ish, maybe about the same, but looked like a near mint, sold for 220. I don't think I'm getting 275 for a very fine-ish, to be honest. It has to be like the right sale, and it has to be listed that way, but look better, I think. Well, the 350 for an 85-ish, 270, 178, 150. Okay. So that's what it's, that's the number of sales. Number of sales of Star Wars 1. Again, a highly desirable book, haven't decreased. What about a book that's a little less desirable? This was a book that was highly touted a couple of years ago. Marvel Premiere number 1. This is not a first appearance. It's like a not first appearance. It's the first appearance of him as Warlock. It's his fifth appearance, but it is issue number 1, 1972, picture frame cover, harder to get in high grade. Let's take a look at this. Okay, 9/8. There's one that's sold. 9/6s, 492. They don't exist, right? 9, 10, 12. 9/4 sell. 9/2s, only 3 in 2022, 17 to 12. Maybe people are holding on to it. 9/0s, 13, 20, 14. 8/5s, 14, 30, 15. There was a bump with the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but this still sells. 25, 36, 16, down in the 7.5, down in the 7.0, but now we're under $100. Okay. And I think that $100 is kind of the cutoff point of what the minimum people are going to submit to get graded. Now, if we look at this on the census, right, look at the number of copies that are less than an 8.0. There are a ton of them, right? There are 115 4.0s. Why is that? Well, largely because in 2021, 2022, during the comic boom, everything was going crazy. People were submitting everything under the sun. Not worth getting submitted. Okay. Another book I wanted to look at, Spider-Woman number 1 from 1978. Not her first appearance either. So a smaller key. But 9/8, there aren't many of them. 162, 164, 131. But look at this. 9/6 is 9/6 is only $66, and 9/8 still 171. 224, 160, 191. Big drop off there. 9/4, 101, 96, 53. 9/0, 88, 73, 52. 9/0, 60, 53, 32. And so on. Right? Not worth getting graded. This is a book that a high grade raw you can get for $25. If you can get a 9/8, it's worth it. If it's not a 9/8, it's not. A few years ago it was. Let's take a look at the values. What was this worth? I mean, look at this. 2021. 2020, 2021. 145 sales, high of 209. Now, high of 109 for a 9.4. A 9.2. Right? In 2022, $216 high sale, 88 copies. It was definitely over 100. This is maybe a book that's overcorrected. 9.0s. Oof. I don't even know what grade I have. I think I sold a 9.0 for like $100 at a show once. Look at this. 9.0s 2022 up to $364. I mean, that wasn't the going rate, right? It was still, it did touch $100 every once in a while. I mean, I sold it for $90 or $100 with a number 2, but still, there were, it still had value and had perceived value because everything was going up. That's a book, and there are others like that. Ms. Marvel number 1 is almost the same case, right? A book, not the first appearance, but people were jumping on it. And then when people realize there are a lot of these out there in mid-grade, not a lot of 9/8s, okay? Supply and demand. right? The supply of graded books far exceeded the demand for that book being graded. Okay, this is another one, Batman 251. Now, this is an ever popular book, and I'm going to scroll down to where we have like an 8.5. More sales this year than either of the last 2 years. Same with an 8.0. 7.5, about the same. 7.0, almost exactly the same. And so on. 6.0, 32 sales. That's almost as many sales as the last 2 years combined. And the price, 8.55 is about the same. Price hasn't really dropped that much in this book, right? This classic Neil Adams cover. I mean, let's say a 7.0, right? Let's look at right. It went up. It hasn't really it didn't jump up that high, hasn't come down that low, right? Okay, got up to 900. You still sells for upwards of 700 plus in a 7.0. And again, these books are tougher and tougher to find raw. A VF about $700, but that's a little bit unusual. You get a little bit below that, you're down $250, and it's harder to sell this book in higher, for high prices in the higher end of mid grade. I want to look at a couple more examples just for fun. Amazing Spider-Man 46, the first appearance of the Shocker. I picked this because it's a first appearance of a character that hasn't been spec'd on, hasn't been seen in movies. One of these villains that we don't really, haven't really seen much. Only a handful of 9.2s and 9.0s, 8.5, 7, 11, and 6, only 6 this year. 8.0, 16, 19, 9, but now we get to 7.5, and it's still a $240 book. 19, 19, 15, 13, 20, 24, 12, 28, 17, and a 6.5, 6.0, 13, 20, 17, 5.5, 14, 29, 21, 5.09, 20, 26. One just sold for 316. That's higher than it should have. Right? So this book is still selling. We go down here, even a 3.5. Recent sale of $150, 12 sales 2 years ago, 8 last year, 11 this year. And that's kind of your cutoff of where it's going to sell. Raws, and again, raws are hard to find in this book in higher grade. Yeah, a high grade, a near mint. Find a near mint just for $670, but you're basically getting $200 to $300 raw. You can get, if you can get an 8.0, you're 384, and now all of a sudden 8.5 jumping up to 690, right? That high grade book is very hard to get. And I think for Silver Age and Silver Age keys, collectors are looking, they're for every book. There's not every book that's worth grading. That's worth, let's say, over $100. Will sell for over $100 at 9.8 at some point in time with some degree of regularity. There are some recorded sales of that. I can take just this random book, right? I'm just going to pull this. This is, I think, the last issue. No, this is just an issue of Adventures of the Outsiders, right? I grade this book. It's not going to return case cost, right? It's just not worth anything, right? But other keys are going to be worth something. Let's look at, I have two more books to look at. Now we're getting older. Batman number 101 from 100 from 1956. This is technically the last book of the Golden Age, I believe, right? Now we have to go down. There aren't many of these, right? 4.0s. There's 6 5.0s that sold this year, 4 4.0s, which is about the same. You just don't see it too often, right? It just doesn't sell that often. And if we look at this in raw condition, there are raw books of this out there, certainly. 250, let's say. But I mean, the highest sale this year is for 270. A good book. A 3.5 just sold for 384. A 5.0 for 850. This is where the grading, if you could find high grade copies, these are really mid grade copies. High grade copies just are very rare. There's really an escalation in the prices for these because there aren't many of them. If we look at the census of this, let me just let's go to Go Collect because that census is a little easier to look at, and they also give you the percentile. So Batman 100, right? The CGC census just lists numbers. Go Collect has the percentiles, which I really like. Right, highest grade is a single 9.4. To get top 10%, you need a 7.5. right? Which, according to them, is a fair market value of about $3,400. One sold this year for $3,360, right? Which is like a $1,400 increase over 7.0. And then, you know, your median is about a 4.5. Again, not many of these out there. There are only 371 universal copies. Let's go back a little bit further. We're going to go back about 10 years. And I just did my CGC census data for 1946. And the most common book for that year was Batman 37. Joker cover. 259 on the census when I looked. It doesn't sell, right? What do we have? We have 5 sales and a 4.5. Only 1 in the 2 years prior to that. 4 sales and a 4.0. 3 and a 3.5. 3 and a 3.0. 1 and a 6.0, 1 and a 5.5. There are more sales of this year, it looks like, just looking at this quickly, than in any previous year. Look, there's even a sale of a 9.2 and a 9.0 of this book in 2024. Because where are you going to find it? These are the kind of books, you know, is this, there are 259 blue labels on the census. Where are you going to find it? If I go to eBay, right? And I do Batman, this is 1946, Batman 37, 1946. I don't bring up the New 52 or, yeah, it ain't there. It's, you're not finding it. Probably you have to go to an auction site, like a Heritage or something. Occasionally we'll have a copy of this. There aren't many. People collect Batman. So what are my takeaways from this video? Do slabs sell? Yes, they still sell if the book is worth being slabbed, right? I had done a video several months ago about a collection I passed on because it was a bunch of 80s and 90s, 9.0s, 9.2s, 9.4s. Those don't sell, right? The only reason those sell is if they're very desirable books, or they're desirable enough that people will CPR them. If you want that book, you're not going to pay for a slab of a book you can get in your collection in high grade for $10 or $20. But there are enough collectors, not every collector, there are enough collectors that want 9.8s for modern books. And I'm talking about books, let's say, from 1979 forward, from the beginning of the direct market age forward, where 9.8s are somewhat attainable. Before that, and I know James from Mindhunter Comics has done a video that they're very hard to find, right? 9.8s, and we saw that with Star Wars. You know, there just aren't many of them compared to 8.0s, 9.0s even. People didn't have bags and boards routinely. So is it of a grade that's worth getting graded? Your clientele, the number of potential buyers, is much more limited because of the value of the book. X-Men 12. It's a $2,000 book, right? Now, here's the other thing is, do you want to sell the book, right? What is a price? Listen, the market, overall, the comic book market has been going down over the last couple of years, right? You might have to sell it for a little less than you wanted to. I've been doing some best offers on eBay recently. Some Dark Knight books. I got 13 of them in different grades. I kept one of each, and I've been accepting offers for all of them because essentially I didn't pay much for them. Right? I'm keeping 4 9.8s, issues 1 through 4 and 9.8, essentially for free because they came out of a collection. Right? Those Marvel Ages, they're $5, $10 books. Somebody offers me 120 for them, I'll accept that. I did put the work in to clean and press it. And, you know, I went through and, you know, kind of looked at 9.8 candidates, sent it out to CGC, spent the time waiting for it to come back from CGC. Took the gamble that it was going to get the 9.8. And as a seller / collector, that's part of the game, right? So I think for books 1980 or forward, most of them, other than a handful, like ASM 300 is an example. ASM 300 is the example, right? It is worth getting graded in lower grades, down to, let's say, 6 or 5. People still buy it. They still want it. Sometimes to CPR potentially. Sometimes because that's what they can afford. They're trying to compete their collection. They're Venom fans, whatever it is. Todd McFarlane, Spawn 1. It's plentiful. A 9.8 is like $1.25. Nobody wants a 9.6. Right? I can get $25. I could probably go to the next show I'm going to go to and get a Spawn 1 for $20. Maybe 25, depending on the seller. Because the other thing too is vendors have lots of them. It's a plentiful book. So is it worth getting graded? Yeah, maybe. But that's only worth it in a 9.8. And that's kind of the juxtaposition of modern books. For other books, there is a price point. There are collectors. That may not be you. It's certainly not every collector. There are collectors that want the best possible or close to it, right? There are the folks, if you're not familiar with the CGC registry sets, almost any collection run of comics. I did it for my Dark Knight. I put in the 4 9/8s I had. 14th on the registry for Batman Dark Knight Returns 1 through 4. Because you get more points if you have a signature series. Somebody has a 10.0 of issue number 3, those sorts of things. 4 9/8s. Listen, they came to me. Didn't go out and buy 9/8s, but there are people that will pay for it, right? Because they want the 9/8 in their collection. This guy wanted his He-Man books all in 9/8s. He saw that I had one, sent me an offer. We made a deal. He has it, and it goes nice in his collection. There is a price point to it, right? Of what is high grade and what's selling. And again, the other thing I'll point to is the online sales. I think for the most part, slabs of higher grade books are easier to sell online because the collector knows what they're getting. They're like, you may have some qualms with CGC, but it's a CGC 7.0. Right? They can look at it. You can see, okay, does it match up? Does it have any, is it wrong? Whatever. Whereas if I just say, it's a 7.0, a little more difficult to trust the seller, right? You can trust me, of course. but you know what I mean? I could have missed something. It could be a difference of opinion. Whereas if I go to show, I can look at the book and say, okay, yes, it is a 7.0. I think that's about right. The price is about, maybe strike a deal, take a look at the book. I don't see any restoration. You feel more comfortable. Looking at pictures online is a little bit more of a gamble. So, moral of the story, people are still buying slabs, but not to the degree and with the fervor that they were during the comic boom. I think that just makes sense. But slab collecting has not disappeared. And we look at the numbers for all different books, and we can see that at a certain grade and a certain price point. I know I've gone on for a bit in this video. I'd like to thank you all for stopping by. I have other things to do. In the meantime, you can take a look at a couple of my other videos here. And this is Jim saying until next time, enjoy your comics.